Venezuelan authorities announced a new attack on the country's power grid this Friday. The electoral campaign ahead of Chile's second-round presidential election this Sunday has concluded as voters prepare to make a choice between two very different models proposed for the country. Palestinians took to the streets of Gaza City on Friday to celebrate the 34th anniversary of the Palestinian resistance movement Hamas. From the headquarters of teleSUR English in Havana, Cuba, this is From the South, and I'm Katrina Goss. We begin in Venezuela, where authorities denounced a new attack on the country's power grid this Friday. Minister for Interior, Justice and Peace, Néstor Luis Reverol, reported that the attack took place in the Guri electricity facility in the south of the country and explained that officials from the Electricity Corporation, Corpoelec, were immediately deployed to the site to restore the service in the states affected by the blackout. The minister also stressed that everything was being done to stabilize the power grid as soon as possible. Among the affected areas were different zones of the capital, Caracas, as well as areas of the states of Zulia, Mérida, Carabobo and Miranda. Venezuela was the target of a series of attacks on its electricity system in 2019, causing nationwide blackouts, which were the result of sabotage by extreme opposition sectors. After registering the highest number of prison massacres in the region in a single year, the government of Ecuador set up a commission to investigate and help end prison violence. The commission, made up of 9 members, has the tasks of establishing a dialogue with inmates and authorities and designing strategies, plans and projects to strengthen the national system of social rehabilitation. President Guillermo Lasso signed the executive decree formalizing the creation of what will be known as the Commission for Penitentiary Dialogue and Pacification on Thursday. Its creation is part of the 7 points of the National Agreement on the prison crisis, which includes a process of reconciliation through dialogue as a major objective. The initiative comes after more than 300 deaths due to violence in the country's prisons were registered this year alone.
The Commission will analyze the causes and effects of the current prison situation in order to establish a pact of internal coexistence with dignity and co-responsibility.
And the Commission, which will operate for 6 months, has 1 civil society representative among its 9 members who explained that they will not start in the most violent prisons, but rather other centers.
Then we're going to establish or try to establish dialogue with the prisoners. There are already other prisons in the country that have expressed their desire to participate and have shown their willingness to enter into a process of internal pacification.
Peruvian Prime Minister Mirta Vázquez welcomed the motion approved in the Foreign Affairs Committee of the Spanish Congress, which backs the government of Pedro Castillo. The Prime Minister declared that the government greatly values the approval of this motion in the Spanish Parliament, which ratifies the recognition of the existence of a democracy in Peru, noting that this recognition is a sign of the legitimacy of Castillo's government. The motion, which supports the result of the presidential elections held in June, was approved on Thursday with 19 votes in favour and 14 against. The initiative was promoted by the Podemos party following reports of a meeting between the President of the Peruvian Congress, María del Carmen Alba, and members of the Foreign Affairs Committee during her recent trip to Spain, in which she was reported to have undermined the legitimacy of the Castillo government and called on Spanish lawmakers to act. Bolivian President Luis Arce thanked the indigenous communities of the country for their support following the conclusion of a national summit on the autonomy of indigenous peoples. In a message posted on his Twitter account, the president expressed his satisfaction with the summit and its conclusions. He also underlined that the indigenous peoples of Bolivia are a living expression of the cultures of South America. Arce also highlighted the approval of a manifesto that makes it clear that the 2021 to 2025 Economic and Social Development Plan does not undermine the autonomy of indigenous communities. The summit was also the stage for a debate on the permanent threats from certain far-right sectors of the country that refuse to accept plurinationality and long for a return to the days of a colonial republic. The event also served to analyse different issues such as economic and productive reconstruction, knowledge and culture. After validating the number of signatures collected by political organisations, trade unions and the population in general, the Electoral Court of Uruguay finally confirmed that the referendum would be held on March 27th against one of the most controversial laws passed by the government of Luis Lacalle. Our correspondent Mateo Grill has the story.
Movements to vote yes or no to the repeal of the most negative articles of the law of urgent consideration of the government of Luis Lacalle has a date. The second part of the campaign began on Wednesday, December 15, with a rally in front of the University of the Republic. One stage ended on December the 8th when the signatures were counted, and the court also decided that the referendum will be held on March 27, and now another begins. The campaign begins our efforts for a yes vote on the pink ballot and for the Uruguayan people to emerge victorious on March 27 and eradicate the 135 articles from our legal system. The event was called to celebrate the confirmation that there will be a referendum. In the coming days, more than 1,000 activities will be held, where the main reasons for repealing the contested articles will be explained. These 137 articles have a cross-cutting series of things that do not do the country any good. They are such as the State Intelligence Department that only reports to the President and nothing to the National Parliament. There are a series of things that, as people become aware of them, I think they will be decided to vote yes. The event included artistic performances and a reading of statements to encourage citizens to commit themselves to the repeal.
We have to vote yes because we have to tell this right-wing neoliberal government with fascist components that we the workers are here, that we the people are here, and that we will not accept backward steps, but that we are moving forward towards the productive country with social justice to which we have always aspired.
The government, the political opposition and social forces are already gearing up for the referendum, the results of which will be decisive for the second half of the presidency of Lacalle Pou. According to the most recent polls, with 3.5 months to go, he has a slight lead, but all analysts agree that the endgame is wide open, absolutely open.
And we'll be right back after this very short break, so don't go away. Welcome back to From the South. The electoral campaign ahead of Chile's second round presidential election this Sunday has concluded as voters prepare to make a choice between two very different models proposed for the country. As established by the Electoral Code, as of this Friday, the pre-election silence is in force, and for 48 hours prior to the opening of polling stations, all campaigning is prohibited throughout the territory, as well as the conducting of polls and advertising. At the same time, the electoral authorities are fine-tuning details regarding the deployment of voting materials, the security of polling stations and health protocols. In this context, the closing day of the campaign was also marked by the death of dictator Augusto Pinochet's widow and a consequent wave of reactions. And the two Chilean presidential candidates held massive campaign closing ceremonies on Thursday, where they once again tried to convince the undecided to turn out and vote for them in Sunday's polls. The far-right candidate of the Christian Social Front coalition, José Antonio Cast, held an event in the Comuna de los Condes, where in an attempt to shake off his macho image, he was preceded by several women who were part of his campaign team and was introduced by his daughter. Cast claimed that his victory was assured and he would win by a wide margin. The possibility of a man who openly defends the legacy of the Pinochet dictatorship taking up the presidency in Chile has driven many sectors who are not inclined to vote to mobilize to ensure the country does not slip back into fascism.
But I have great news for you, that on Sunday we're going to win, and we are going to win with an important difference. Because dignity is what we lack, but true dignity. Not that dignity that some want with violence, someone with intolerance, someone to take that intolerance, that violence to tell us what dignity is. That is a false dignity. We're going to work for the true dignity of the people.
Meanwhile, the presidential candidate of the Apruebo Dignidad coalition, Gabriel Boric, closed his campaign with assurances that his government would not neglect the health sector and would advance in the task of building a plurinational country, hand in hand with the Constitutional Convention and indigenous peoples.
We will also create in our government, and we have discussed this. These are not ideas that appear in a meeting of politicians in a commando, but they are the product of the social struggles of many particularly in this case of the health workers. I want to talk to you about the fact that in our government we will create a universal health system that does not discriminate between rich and poor, so that everyone has the right to be healthy. It is difficult to talk about the first thing we are going to do when we enter government, but what we are certain of is that on that day we will not enter alone, but with us the people will enter.
Panama's Indigenous Ancestral Games are sessioning, which seek to preserve age-old customs. 250 competitors from Panama's 7 recognized indigenous ethnicities are taking part in the traditional athletic feats at the Games. The major cultural festival transcends the simple quest for sporting success by helping to preserve a way of life. This is the 3rd edition of the event that resembles the Scottish Highland Games and Basque rural sports competitions. In Panama, contestants compete in archery, spear throwing, log carrying, tug of war, running, swimming and canoeing in Nagabugli, the largest of Panama's 5 traditional indigenous regions. Panama's recognized indigenous communities represent 12% of the country's 4.3 million population, according to the last official census in 2010. These communities are facing a number of challenges, especially in relation to recognition of and rights to territories, as well as forcible eviction. After 2 years at the forefront of the World Health Organization's pandemic battle, and despite the ongoing challenges including vaccine inequality and the spread of new variants of COVID-19, Emergencies Chief Michael Ryan remains optimistic that humanity will change course and take the steps needed to tame the virus.
I'm filled with optimism for what we can collectively achieve as a species. When we come to terms with, inclusion and social justice and equity and health justice and equity and climate justice and equity, and that I think we're beginning to see that this planet and this very stressed planet, politically, ecologically, that we need to take a different path. And I think there's a generation emerging that want that path. They want something more sustainable. I do think if we knuckle down now in terms of disease control, if we knuckle down in terms of getting vaccine coverage up, if we continue to evolve our surveillance and our epidemiology and our ability to produce 2nd and 3rd generation vaccines, then I think we can consign this virus at the very least to amongst the other viruses that cause respiratory infections. I don't think we'll ever quite get rid of this virus. I think it's here to stay, in the same way that influenza never really goes away,
And we have more stories coming up after this final short break. Stay with us. Welcome back to From the South. Palestinians took to the streets of Gaza City on Friday to march in support of the Palestinian resistance movement Hamas and celebrate its 34th anniversary as the organisation called on Israel to end its suffocation of the Palestinian people. Thousands of Hamas members and supporters participated in the march and rally launched after Friday prayers in the Gaza Strip. Addressing the crowds, Hamas leaders stressed that they will continue to resist the Israeli occupation and blockade. They also noted that Jerusalem is a red line and will remain the centre of conflict, noting that defending it is a sacred duty. Hamas adheres to achieving national unity, making great concessions with flexibility and welcoming all Arab efforts that motivate the reconciliation, according to its leaders. And a demonstration in the Israeli-annexed East Jerusalem neighbourhood of Sheikh Jarrah turned violent as Israeli security forces repressed Palestinian protesters. Land rights tensions in Sheikh Jarrah exploded in May when at least 7 Palestinian families protested an attempt by illegal Israeli settlers to evict them from their homes. The United Nations Office for the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs last month said there had been 410 attacks by settlers against Palestinians, against individuals and on property, in the first 10 months of this year alone. Demonstrators rallied in Tunisia on Friday to mark the anniversary of what became known as the revolution that sparked the 2011 Arab uprisings. This Friday marks 11 years since street vendor Mohamed Bouazizi set himself alight in the marginalized town of Sidi Bouzid, sparking a 4-week uprising that forced Sini El Abidine Ben Ali from power. This year's commemorations come as the country split regarding the move by President Kais Saied back in July to sack the government, freeze parliament and seize far-reaching powers, while vowing to hold his corrupt political rivals to account. On Monday, the president prolonged his suspension of parliament until elections in December 2022 and announced a nationwide public consultation to draw up a new constitution. The United Nations Educational, Scientific and Cultural Organization included a traditional Syrian musical genre from the city of Aleppo on its representative list of the intangible cultural heritage of humanity. The recognition is seen by Syrians as a new triumph in their battle against terrorism, which has been trying to erase their cultural identity for more than 10 years. Our correspondent Hisham Wanas has a story.
The Syrian Minister of Culture announced the news at a press conference during which she denounced that after more than 10 years of terrorist war, Syria today faces an economic and psychological blockade aimed at destroying its identity and will and undermining its ability to resist. She clarified that with the inclusion of Al-Qudud al-Halabiyya on the representative list of the intangible cultural heritage of humanity, the country broke the blockade and managed to place itself on the world cultural map, allowing it to move onto the world tourist map.
The inclusion of Al-Qud on the World Heritage List confirms that no one can tear us away from our roots and alienate us from our culture, as the whole world now recognizes that we are the builders of a civilization and that our culture inherited through generations is recognized worldwide.
Syrians celebrated the news in the capital's iconic Umayvad Square, singing and dancing to the traditional music of Aleppo al-Qudud. They praised UNESCO's action as an additional step in safeguarding their cultural identity dating back thousands of years, as well as a Syrian victory in the struggle to preserve, protect, and defend national heritage and pass it on to future generations.
This event shows that despite the terrorist war that attack our cultural identity and our heritage, we are able to show the whole world that our intangible heritage is our identity, that we will persevere and pass on the new generations.
I congratulate all the people of Syria for this achievement, which is a victory that shows the culture and civilized nature of the Syrian people. And today, with this achievement, the name of Syria and the flag of Syria will be held high thanks to the civilization and cultural creativity of its people. Al-Qudud al-Halabiyya is a traditional musical genre typical of the Syrian province of Aleppo in the form of a uniform melody sung to the accompaniment of musical ensemble in a religious context. This year, it joins the Damascene Rose and Shadow play inscribed on the Cultural Heritage List in 2019 and 2018, respectively. Symbols of Syria's rich and diverse culture far removed from the terrorist ideology that, for more than a decade, has been trying in vain to propagate in this Arab country.
Hisham Wanas, teleSUR, Damascus, Syria.
11 people, including 2 foreigners, died on Friday in flash floods which swept through northern Iraq after torrential rains in Erbil, the capital of the semi-autonomous Kurdish region. In a country dealing with severe drought, many were caught by surprise as powerful storm waters started surging into their homes before dawn. Local officials confirmed that the 2 foreign casualties were Filipino and Turkish nationals. The provincial governor reported significant damage, especially in a working-class district southeast of the city. The country has been hit by a succession of extreme weather events, enduring blistering temperatures and repeated droughts in recent years, but has also experienced intense floods. The severity of the drought has forced many farming families to leave their land and seek a living in urban areas.
My son called me and told me to come here at night because there is a flood. Thank God we're fine. The most important thing is that we are safe. Everything else can be fixed. The water level reached around 1 meter 60, 1 meter 80. The reason is due to the neglect of the government and the lack of a solid plan for that. The same thing has happened before. This is the third time floods hit us. There are no sewage systems or anything that saves us from danger.
And we've come to the end of this news brief. Remember, you can find these and many other stories on our website at telesurenglish.net. And you can also follow us on social media for all the latest news. We're on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram and Telegram. For TeleSUR English, I'm Katrina Goss. Thank you for watching.